All right. Hey, folks, how's it going today? Sorry about the technical difficulties. Um, and um, I know that I was supposed to do a continuation of my talk about Darwin, um, but I have something a little different. So, Stan, don't kill me. I have something a little different that I was really impressed about in my studies this week. Um, and it's on the subject uh, of health and the things that we eat every day. And so the next time I come on for TRP, I will definitely do part two of my Darwin study. But today I want to talk about health because this is something that um, many of us struggle with. What we see um, in the world today is we see a prevalence of diseases that used to be known as rich men's diseases. So, for example, um, things like hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, those were things that were found very rarely amongst poor people or lower class people because they didn't have access to the rich foods and the amount of food. And so they ate very simple diets, very meager diets. They ate things that were, closer to the ground, if you will. And the rich, wealthy people, the lords, the kings, the nobles, and things like that had access to all the rich foods, and so they contracted these diseases that were so uncommon amongst us regular folk that they were called rich men's diseases. But now these rich men's diseases are seen amongst all populations. And what has changed? Well, there's a lot of things that have changed. But before I get into speaking about that specifically, I want to talk about um, I want to talk about how people react when they hear things about um, things like diet. Oftentimes people will get very defensive, and the reason why is because as human beings, psychologically, we are wired to protect ourselves. That's how we survive. And this is what often leads to defensive behavior. Now, being defensive when it comes to actually defending, maybe a family member or your child or yourself is not bad. But when we hear an unpopular truth or something that we're not accustomed to hearing, or something that maybe steps on our toes or makes us a little uncomfortable, being defensive can actually keep us from experiencing a fuller life, right? And so it's very important that we understand defensive behavior and that we don't become reactive and overprotective mentally when we hear information that maybe tramples upon a sacred cow of ours. Um, because really, it's an impulse. That's what it is. It's an impulsive reaction. And one way to move past that defensive behavior is just to acknowledge it, just to acknowledge it. As human beings, we are naturally defensive because we're trying to protect ourselves. Or maybe in the case of food, for example, we're trying to protect um, something that brings us pleasure, right? You talk to a cigarette smoker about their cigarettes and they might get really defensive, even though they know it's bad for them, even though you share them factual evidence that smoking cigarettes causes cancer and things like that. They will get mad and defensive when you tell them, hey, you should really think about not smoking because it brings them pleasure. And in the same way, when you talk about food, if it's something that they enjoy eating, that they've grown up eating their whole lives, that they've grown up eating their whole lives, that's uh, that they've grown up eating their whole lives, um, and you, um, I guess, uh, bring that up, they can get very defensive about that, especially when it comes to like cultural issues. Because you talk about, let's say people from the islands and their fish or whatever it may be. Sometimes people might get really upset, but in the book of Hosea, chapter 4:6, it says something that I think is very interesting. And whether you're a Christian or not, I think this rings true, but it says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." And one of the big reasons why people become sick or become, unhealthy or whatever is because of lack of knowledge. There are many people who went into an early grave simply because they didn't know the truth about health and about diet and things like that. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was something called bioengineered foods. Now, if you go into your cupboard, I can almost guarantee you that 90% of you will find something in there that says contains bioengineered ingredients on the package. Okay, they have slipped that into the ingredients and onto the labels of the food, but we don't really know what that means. And there's an article from the Center of Food Safety called Genetically Engineered Foods and Your Health. Now, you have people like, influencers like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who says that genetically engineered foods are fine. They're perfectly safe to eat. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a sellout and a fool. So you don't want to take any um, knowledge about genetically engineered foods or your health from a fool like him. Besides, he's an astrophysicist. What does this man know about health and food? You see, but that's the problem with people like him, is they become experts in one area and they think they're experts in all areas. So anyway, yeah, I'm not a fan of that guy. But in this article, it says a significant percentage of processed foods purchased today contain some genetically engineered or bioengineered food products. As a result, listen to this, as a result, each day, tens of millions of American infants, children, and adults are they eat genetically engineered foods without their knowledge. So you're going along living life just eating, things that taste good and feels good, whatever, and you may not realize that you're eating bioengineered foods. And unfortunately, consumers have no way of knowing what foods are really genetically engineered, because our loving government and the US Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, um, does not require labeling of these foods. Isn't that interesting? The agency, it says here, the agency's failure to require testing or labeling of genetically engineered food has made millions of consumers into guinea pigs, unknowingly testing the safety of dozens of gene altered food products. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be a human experiment. I don't want to be a human guinea pig, if you will. Now, if you want to be that, that's fine, but I'm not interested. Okay, but basically, if we're eating bioengineered foods, we're essentially that. And the reason why is because, as I said, the FDA does not require any pre-market safety testing of bioengineered or genetically modified foods. Okay. So there's no way to know. And they just said, yeah, it's fine. Um, in response to the FDA, in response to a lawsuit filed by the Center for Food Safety in 1998, admitted in court that it made no dispositive scientific findings whatsoever about the safety of genetically engineered foods. In other words, the FDA just basically gave the biotech industry carte blanche to produce and market any number of bioengineered foods without the normal mandatory agency oversight, or safety testing, and without showing that the foods are actually safe to consume. Um, Now, this is the same FDA that wants to take your vitamins off the market, and wants to say you can't have this or that um, vitamin or supplement. But genetically modified foods are like, oh no, it's fine. We don't have any evidence that it's fine, but yeah, it's fine. Um, in this article, it talks about 6 potential human health concerns of genetically engineered or bioengineered foods. And again, when you hear fools like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is a sellout, he's bought and paid for, saying that they're safe, you can safely ignore any advice from that man, because that is anything but the truth. um, it says that here, um, uh, one of the unexpected new unexpected effects and health risks posed by genetic engineering is toxicity. Okay, says here that the FDA was well aware of the genetic instability problem prior to establishing their no testing policy. So they don't test anything, right? FDA scientists warned that this problem could create dangerous toxins in food and was a significant health risk. So the the scientists, okay, so listen to me, the FDA, the governing body, right, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the governing body that was supposed to have oversight over things that go into our food supply and our bodies and things like that to, prevent um, uh, unhealthy things being consumed by the general populace. Um, they ignored their own scientists, like staff working FDA scientists said that uh, these bioengineered foods could create dangerous toxins in food and was a significant health risk. And the scientists specifically warned that genetic engineering of foods could result in increased levels of known naturally occurring toxicants, appearance of new toxicants, and not previously identified toxicants, and increased capability of concentrating toxic substances from the environment, like pesticides and heavy metals. So these same FDA scientists recommended that long-term toxicological tests be required prior to marketing of genetically engineered foods. And the FDA, the governing body, ignored their own scientists and said, "No, it's fine." Now, how does that happen? How in the world does that happen? How does this governing body that's supposed to be protecting us and protecting our health have a no testing policy for bioengineered foods, which is a very new thing? And where they're actually, people say, oh, genetically engineered foods, that's been going on for centuries. If you've mixed this seed and that, no, that's not what it is at all. That's foolishness. Okay, because what's happening with genetically engineered foods is that they are taking foreign genes and bacterial viral vectors and viral promoters and antibiotic markers, and they're engineering them into the food. So, for example, um, they're engineering pesticides into certain crops. And so that way, when the bugs go and eat these crops, they die or they immediately turn away from them because the crops in and of themselves have these pesticides. They're doing really weird stuff like that, and we don't know how that's going to affect us. I mean, we have some idea, but we don't. The FDA has never done any studies on that, and they've ignored their own scientists. Okay, so even though the scientists recommended long-term studies prior to genetically engineered foods and bioengineered foods being marketed, the FDA was like, "Nah, it's fine." Why? Why? You know why? Because of money. You see, in the Bible, it says the love of money is the root of all evil. So when you look at some sort of heinous evil, um, at the root of it is almost always greed, avarice, the love of money. What's happening is there's something in Congress that should be disallowed, but they won't do that because the people in Congress and things like that, in the Senate, in the legislative branch, they make too much money off of this. It's called lobbyists. And so, what lobbyists are is they're representatives that work for these big corporations that lobby a politician to pass a certain law or to not vote for a certain law or to push something that would be in favor of them, in other words, in favor of them making more money, even if it's to the detriment of the health of people, like, let's say, passing a drug or a certain specific treatment that was never fully tested, and even though billions of people took it, it's now being taken off the market quietly. I won't say what it is, but you can probably guess. um, but they do these things and they say, hey, we'll make sure and donate to your campaign and make sure you get reelected and keep you in office and things like that. And that should be illegal, but it's not. So these lobbyists have control over politicians and over the laws that get passed in that country, and this should not be so. That's why this country is essentially an oligarchy. It's essentially run by corporations because of lobbyists. That's how the FDA, despite the fact that their scientists said bioengineering could be extremely dangerous and cause significant health risks, the FDA is like, nah, it's fine. Second reason, because of allergic reactions, right? So genetic engineering of foods creates a couple separate and serious health risks involving allergic reactions. The first is that um, the genetic engineering can transfer allergens from foods to which people know they're allergic to foods that they think are safe. And this is not like hyperbole, and it's not a hypothetical. Um, in a study from the New England Journal of Medicine, it showed that when a gene from a Brazil nut was engineered into a soybean, people allergic to nuts had serious reactions to the genetically engineered products. So if your soybean was used in some sort of canned food or whatever, um, and you were allergic to nuts, all of a sudden you're thinking this thing is safe that you're eating. Of course this doesn't have nuts, but because it was genetically engineered to have uh, a gene from the Brazil nut and the soybean, now people who are allergic to nuts are having serious reactions. And there was at least one food, it was called a Pioneer Hybrid International Soybean, that was abandoned because of this very problem. And without labeling, people that have known food allergies really don't have any way of avoiding potentially serious health risks that are caused by eating bioengineered foods containing hidden and unknown allergic material. um, and once again, the FDA's own scientists urged long-term testing to see whether or not this would be a problem. But again, the FDA ignored their own scientists because these foods were allowed to be marketed without any kind of mandatory testing for any, um, you know, to know whether or not these things were going to cause allergic reactions. And as a result, our loving government allowing these things to be into the market without being tested, millions of unsuspecting people have continuously been exposed to like a potentially very serious health risk. Um, and this FDA action is what you would call seriously negligent, because the potential consequences of eating food allergies are sudden death. I mean, I remember a story years ago. It was about a girl that ate like a peanut butter cookie or a peanut butter sandwich, and then kissed her boyfriend. And the young man was severely allergic to peanuts, but she kissed him. All she did was kiss him, and the boy died. Okay. So, like sudden death is a serious issue with people with food allergens. And most of the time, the people who are affected by food allergens are children. And yet the FDA was like, nah, it's fine. Right. So that's a second thing, allergic reactions. The third issue with bioengineered foods is antibiotic resistance. So another hidden risk of genetically engineered foods is that um, they can make disease causing bacteria actually resistant to current antibiotics on the market. So your penicillin, your erythromycin, your amoxicillin ain't gonna work the same way. And what that does is it results in a significant increase in the spread of infections and diseases in the human population. And again, our loving government, the FDA, who is supposed to be the governing body that's supposed to prevent stuff like that from happening, they ignored their own scientists' concerns over this problem in its own study on genetically engineered and bioengineered foods. Um, but the British Medical Association who is not a part of the FDA, said this. They said there should be a ban on the use of antibiotic resistance marker genes in genetically modified food, as the risk to human health from antibiotic resistance developing in microorganisms is one of the major public health threats that will be faced in the 21st century. But they want you to believe that it's COVID. So they allow this stuff into our food supply anyway, um, and they don't really care what the consequences are. Whereas most of our food, our manufactured processed food, is not even allowed in many countries across the world, like Japan, countries in Europe, ban most of our food because they're like, we're not going to feed this to our people. But the United States, the FDA, they're like, sure, no problem. Number four, Number four potential danger with bioengineered foods is immunosuppression. So, the well respected British Journal of Medicine, called The Lancet, published an important study by Dr. Arpad Pustai and Stanley W.B. Ewan under a grant from the Scottish government. The study examined the effects on rats of the consumption of potatoes genetically engineered to contain the biopesticide Bacillus thuringiensis. And the scientists found that the rats consuming the genetically altered potatoes showed significant detrimental effect on organ development, biometabolism, and immune function. The biotechnology industry launched a major attack on Dr. Pustai and his study. However, they have, as of yet, not produced a single study of their own to refute his findings. Moreover, 22 leading scientists recently declared that animal tests results linking genetically engineered food to immunosuppression are, in fact, valid. So, um, yeah, bioengineered food and immunosuppression are a big problem. And how many of us like cancer? Anybody of us like cancer? How many of us have had a family member that died from cancer? Okay. Well, along with its approval of bioengineered foods, the FDA in 1993 also approved the use of genetically engineered recombinant bovine growth hormone, or RBGH. You ever see like milk that says no RGBH in it or whatever? This is used to induce dairy cows to produce more milk. Because when is a cow supposed to produce milk? When the cow is pregnant and has a calf, so that the cow can feed the calf. So, how do you keep a cow producing milk year round like a milk machine? You give them the recombinant bovine growth hormone. And at the time, the FDA assured consumers that the milk was safe. Since then, however, regulatory bodies in both Canada and Europe have rejected the drug, citing numerous animal and human health concerns. And it says perhaps the most immediate concern for the consumers is that research shows that the levels of a hormone called insulin-like growth factor, or IGF-1, are increased in dairy products produced from cows treated with RBGH. The Canadians and Europeans found that the FDA listen to this. The Canadians and Europeans found that the FDA, our loving government, had completely failed to consider a study which showed that the increased IGF-1 in RBGH milk could survive digestion and make its way into the intestines and bloodstreams of consumers. These findings are significant because numerous studies now demonstrate that IGF-1 is an important factor in the growth of breast cancer, prostate cancer, and colon cancer. I don't know about you, but I don't want any of those things. Um, Loss of nutrition. So, we also know that right now food is probably more expensive than ever, and we can sit and talk about why that is all day long, but we just know that's the fact, right? And our food, especially processed food, is probably less nutritious than ever. If you wonder why people need to snack after they've eaten a full meal, or why they feel hungry 2 hours later, it's because they're eating a bunch of empty calories. There's not nearly as much level of nutrients in the food, and that's because scientists specifically that were involved specifically warned the FDA that genetic engineering of foods could result in an undesirable, quote unquote, undesirable altercation or alteration in the level of nutrients of bioengineered foods. And the FDA was like, ah, you guys, I know you're on the payroll, but who cares? We're going to put it out anyway. So, a lot of times people just need healthy whole food, and if you're still hungry in between meals, you're probably just bored and need a glass of water. But if you're eating genetically engineered food, your body's, clamoring for nutrients. And that's why a lot of people feel tired all the time, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so you're probably sitting here and you're like, okay, yeah, whatever, man, sounds good. Bioengineering food is bad. Like, no argument here. Well, I'm going to give you some examples of bioengineered food, and some of y'all might get a little mad because some of y'all like these things. Uh, so how about this one? Pop Tarts. You like Pop Tarts? Bioengineered. Cheez Its. Oof. Goldfish. Bioengineered. How about y'all who like to put ranch dressing on everything? You like that Hidden Valley Ranch? Guess what? Bioengineered ingredients. Clapper Girl baking powder. Bioengineered ingredients. Fruit Loops. Honey Nut Cheerios. That's healthy, right? No. Bioengineered ingredients. Ice cream, cheese, Ritz crackers, M&Ms, Betty Crocker cake mix, honey made graham crackers, bioengineered ingredients. Oh, but I'm sick, and so I'm going to be healthy and have a can of Campbell's chicken noodle soup because that's what Mama gave me when I was young. Well, not only is it full of that old nasty what's that stuff, the accent stuff, monosodium glutamate, but it also has bioengineered ingredients. How about Snickers? Bioengineered ingredients. How about mayonnaise? Mayonnaise is disgusting, anyways, but for those of you who like it, bioengineered ingredients. Oreos? Yep. Lucky Charms, Hot Pockets, Cocoa Puffs, Pillsbury cinnamon rolls, bioengineered ingredients. How about lean cuisine meals? You probably saw lean cuisine and were like, well, I want to lose weight. That looks healthy. Bioengineered ingredients. Chips Ahoy, Yoo-Hoo, Skittles, bioengineered ingredients. Doritos, yep, that too. Prego spaghetti sauce, mm-hmm. How about Coffee Mate, or as they call it in health circles, Cancer Mate? Basically, anything that says contains bioengineered ingredients on the package, you should probably throw away and never buy it again. And you don't even want to feed that to your dog, right? So, um, now that I've stepped all over your sacred cows and your favorite treats, you're probably wanting to turn this talk off. But I, I just want to ask you to just hang with me a little bit longer because I want you to know the truth. And I'm about to step on some people's sacred cow right now. It's going to get a little worse. Speaking of coffee, well, they said back in the days when I was younger, there used to be this jingle for this commercial, and it would go, "The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup." Well, as Maury Povich would say, that is a lie. Okay. Um, there was a little old lady who wrote a book in the 19th century called Counsels on Diet and Foods. And she said that coffee is a hurtful indulgence. It temporarily excites the mind to unwanted action, but after the after effect is exhaustion, prostration, paralysis of mental, moral, and physical powers. The mind becomes enervated unless through determined effort the habit is overcome. Um, and that's why people have their cup of coffee in the morning before work, zip zip, they grab their donut, their banana, their bagel, whatever they grab, boom boom, and then around 10 o'clock they have a coffee break. Why? Because coffee break is when they need to get that second cup of coffee to amp them back up because they're feeling the crash, right? And then they have lunch and they have their big old plate of whatever, big old, ham sandwich or whatever it is that people eat at lunch. And then they start to crash again around 2:30, and they take another break. So that they can go get a soda from the vending machine and get that hit of Coca-Cola to keep them awake, right? But what happens when we consume things like coffee is this little old lady said that the activity of the brain is permanently lessened. So let's think about this for a second. One of the most prevalent concerns amongst aging adults in the United States is degenerative brain diseases like Alzheimer's. We have created a society where people believe that as adults, they must wake up and have their morning cup of joe every day because that's what it means to be an adult. I am a weirdo because I wake up and drink a cup of water or blackstrap molasses or something like that. But I never touch coffee. Okay. And we have this whole society that's doing this. And now we have this correlating event of the rapid increase of degenerative brain diseases. And this little old lady said that the brain activity of the brain is permanently lessened. Very interesting. Little old lady also said all these nerve irritants are wearing away the life forces. So these stimulants like caffeine are wearing away the life forces. Um, and the restlessness caused by shattered nerves, the patience, the mental feebleness, became a warring element antagonizing the spiritual progress. These should not then should not those who advocate temperance and reform be awake to counteract the evils of these injurious drinks. In some cases, it is as difficult to break the coffee habit as it is for the inebriate to discontinue the use of liquor. So puts it on the same level as liquor. And some of y'all be sneaking that coffee on the under, but it ain't healthy for you. And it says it's wearing away the life force. Sounds like a dangerous thing. Well, you know what? We knew this a long time ago. You see, at the end of the 19th century, the US government sought to regulate the use of drugs in different things that we consume. And so they created a drug schedule. And on that schedule was things like cocaine, heroin, things like that. Because um, back in the days, they would they would put morphine in soda and candy to make people get a little kick because how that's how they made them addictive. In fact, they used to have morphine lollipops, and they would advertise that if your baby was colicky, just give them a morphine lollipop and they'll calm down. Yeah, I bet they would. You giving them dope, you got your kid all doped up on basically heroin, and yeah, that's why they're calm. You ever seen a heroin addict after they got their hit? Well, um, and in the Coca-Cola, why do you think they call it Coca-Cola? Because it had cocaine in it, right? So how did that get? So what happened was they had this schedule, and on the schedule with cocaine and heroin and morphine and things like that, they had caffeine. And the lobbyist for the soft drink manufacturer said, "Hey, you can't take everything away from us. We've got to be allowed to put something in our drinks that is addictive." And the government said, "Fine, you can have caffeine." And so this is coffee. It's full of caffeine, which is incredibly addictive. And you say, "Oh well, I drink decaf. Decaf is only 98% decaffeinated, by the way." Um, This little old lady says, "The money expended for tea and coffee is worse than wasted. They do only harm, and that continually. Those who use tea, coffee, opium, alcohol may sometimes live to an old age, but this fact is no argument in favor of the use of these stimulants." Um, and, you know, this person who wrote this was often called crazy and dismissed, because this was the late 19th century, early 20th century. But you know what? Science tells us that coffee is, in fact, not very good for you. Um, And there are a lot of issues with people that consume coffee. Listen to this. This is from Wikipedia about caffeine. It says caffeine is the world's most widely consumed psychoactive drug. Unlike most other psychoactive substances, caffeine remains largely unregulated and legal in nearly all parts of the world. Caffeine is also an outlier, as its use is seen as socially acceptable in most cultures and even encouraged in others. Caffeine in coffee and other caffeine in coffee and other caffeinated drinks can affect the gastrointestinal motility and gastric acid secretion, so the acid that your stomach makes to help you digest food. In postmenopausal women, this means women who have already gone through menopause, high caffeine consumption can accelerate bone loss. So you always hear about women falling and breaking a hip or a leg or things like that when they're older. Well, this accelerates that potential possibility. Here's the psychological effects. It says undesired symptoms from caffeine ingestion are common and include mild anxiety, jitteriness, insomnia, increased sleep latency, reduced coordination. Caffeine can have negative effects on anxiety disorders. Now, I don't know about you, but um, there's a lot of anxiety and depression going on in the world. It's almost an inevitability that somebody's going to have some sort of issue with anxiety nowadays. And they think maybe they have some sort of chemical imbalance, but it could just be that they're drinking too much coffee and eating bioengineered foods. Um, says at high doses, typically greater than 300 milligrams, caffeine can both cause and worsen anxiety. For some people, discontinuing caffeine use can significantly reduce anxiety. So, says greater than 300 milligrams. Well, a typical cup of coffee, depending on what bean is used, um, contains between 80 and 175 milligrams of caffeine. So basically, you have a couple, 2, 3 cups of coffee, and you're screwed, right? So um, that's not something that you really want to drink in the morning. And here's another reason why: because um, when you drink coffee on an empty stomach, it actually has a very high acid content, and um, it's suggested that you drink your coffee along with food to help cushion the potential impact on your digestion. You know what else they say that you should only take with food in many cases? Pharmaceutical drugs. Okay, if that gives you any idea of how bad that stuff is. Okay, why should you also not take off? See, the first thing people do is they get up, they fumble to the coffee machine, they put their cup of coffee, hit the machine while they're still barely awake, and then they get their coffee and they wake up. Right, first thing they do is drink that cup of coffee. Well, drinking coffee is very dehydrating. Now, when you sleep, that's a called a dehydrating event. While we sleep, we lose about a liter of water. So if you then wake up and drink coffee first thing in the morning, you're actually um, causing uh, more dehydration. And so that's actually terrible for you because coffee is a diuretic. Um, so instead of drinking water, or instead of drinking coffee, you should probably drink water first. And another reason why you shouldn't drink coffee is because it can cause cortisol levels to rise. Now, cortisol levels, that's the stress hormone. That's what causes the fight or flight. And drinking caffeinated drinks like coffee tends to raise cortisol levels. So if you're struggling with anxiety, um, you should probably stay away from things like coffee. People say, "Oh, but I drink it and I feel more alert." And it's like, okay, yay. But you also are making yourself more stressed and anxious. So, boo, right? Do you really want that? And another reason, and I'll end because some of y'all are like, I can't stand this. I don't want to listen to this any longer. But you can't turn away because you're curious, right? Another reason is because there are molds in coffee that actually cause cancer. Um, I have an article here on mold in coffee, and it says the truth is that much of the world's coffee consumption comes with harmful mold and mycotoxins, which, according to the WHO, are the main culprit behind long term health issues like immune deficiencies, severe onset of allergies, poisoning, um, and unfortunately, mold causes cancer too. Um, Here's the truth about moldy coffee: 45% of commercially available coffee beans contain ochratoxin A. Up to 55% of green coffee beans showed a prevalence of aflatoxins. Coffee roasting does help reduce toxins, excuse, but still nearly a third, 27% of roasted coffee contains ochratoxin A. And what um, and it says mycotoxins are toxic byproducts of certain types of molds. And to this day, scientists have identified several hundred different mycotoxins, but the most commonly occurring and most toxic molds are aflatoxin B1. Ingested in large doses, ingesting large doses of aflatoxin B1 via regular coffee consumption can lead to poisoning and liver damage. Worse still, there is evidence that aflatoxins can cause liver cancer too. I don't think you want that. Ochratoxin. So there's three types of ochratoxins. There's A, B, and C. But ochratoxin A is the most lethal one. It's been proven to damage the liver and kidneys. And contrary to other mycotoxins, levels of ochratoxin A don't drop during the coffee roasting process. And it means the most lethal mycotoxin that gets straight into your blood in the morning is that ochratoxin A. And then there are all sorts of symptoms related from illness due to drinking coffee with ochratoxin A and aflatoxins and mold. The most common are from coffee mold growth are headaches, dizziness, anxiety, irritability, and stomach problems. And people who drink large amounts of coffee are more likely to experience these side effects. So a lot of times, we might have these ongoing headaches and issues like that, and doctors can't diagnose what it is. They've done all the battery of tests, they can't figure it out, and it's because you're poisoning yourself every day with drinking that moldy coffee full of ochratoxin A and things like that that cause cancer. So I don't know if you want to drink that or that coffee mate or cancer mate. Um, but there's a lot of issues with things like bioengineered ingredients, toxins. We can get into meat and all the antibiotics and the disease that's passing between your teeth when you eat that meat. But we'll have to cover that another time. Um, but I just want to encourage you to think about what it is that you're eating. We shouldn't just eat things solely because they taste good. That should not, because there's a lot of things that taste good that ain't good for us. People smoke crack for a reason, and it ain't because it sucks. I'm sure to those people that enjoy a little crack every now and then, I'm sure it's rather amazing. I'll never find out, but I'm pretty sure that they don't do it because it's terrible. But that doesn't mean it's good for them. You see, so there are a lot of things food wise that are amazing. They taste so good, but they're not good for us. Um, so how do you start to move away from this? I usually tell people don't go extreme and just quit cold turkey, because most of the time you'll just go back. Take baby steps to try and wean off of a lot of these things, and until you can find things to replace them. And what I encourage people to do is something called one raw plate a day. So I started a Facebook group called the one raw plate a day, and it's a challenge because most people eat 3 meals a day. I eat two, but most people eat 3 meals a day. And what I encourage people to do is replace one of those meals, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, whichever one works best for you, with a plate of raw food. Because what you're doing is, you want to get organic. You're getting things packed with vitamins, packed with nutrients in their whole form, right? So you know that they don't have unhealthy ingredients. And again, if you get organic, non-GMO stuff, you're getting healthier stuff as it is. But these things are also full of living enzymes, and live food equals live body. So even if some of these other things that we mentioned are still an issue for you and you're struggling to overcome it, just start with including one raw plate of food a day. It will make a big difference in your life, and you will see you will feel better, you will look better, you know, and you will add years to your life by combining that with a healthy lifestyle that includes exercise, good sleep, water, sunshine, and trusting God. I hope you all enjoyed that. I'll be back next time. We'll definitely have part 2 of my Darwin series, but I thought that this was important and I wanted to share it with you all. So take care.